Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's morning coffee and a thought brought to you by Wings of Faith Ministries here in Sarnia. And we hope you're enjoying your coffee. I certainly am enjoying mine. This morning, we want to talk about a man greatly revered in the Jewish community, Moses. Moses, the lawgiver, the deliverer, their prophet, their miracle worker, and of course, their leader. And yet, in all these ways and in all these titles, at the end of his life, Moses was really unable to cross the finish line. That's what we want to talk about today. What happened and how did he find himself in that situation? First of all, we'll go back to our thought in just a moment. But we want to remind you that Morning Coffee and a Thought can be seen every Friday beginning at 1 p.m. on our YouTube channel and Sunday morning at 8 a.m. on our Facebook page. And we hope you will join us this week. Now let's get back to our thought. In Deuteronomy chapter 34, we have what I believe is one of the saddest scenes in the Bible. God commands Moses to climb to the top of Mount Nebo in the plains of Moab. As Moses scales that mountain and reaches the top, Yahweh tells him that he can look across the Jordan River and see the land that the Israelites are going to take possession of. But Moses himself, like his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam, will not be allowed to cross it. And we want to take a look at what happened and what are the lessons we can learn from Moses' experience. It all begins in the area called Kadesh. And in their 40-year wandering in the wilderness, most of their time was spent in this area. The story begins when they land in Kadesh. Moses' sister Miriam passes away. After she is buried and they observe their 30 days of mourning, the community begins to complain to Moses that there's no water source and there's no arable land in that area to grow anything to eat. The people start complaining, just like they had done for the last 38 to 40 years. Moses and Aaron approach the tent of meeting to meet with Yahweh over what to do with the situation. Yahweh gives them clear instructions. He says, I want you to go to a rock, probably some type of rock formation jutting out of the side of a hill or mountain. And he says, I want you to speak to it, and it will provide a source of water for the people and the livestock. But it's what happens on the way from the tent of meeting to the rock that gets both Moses and his brother Aaron in trouble. You see, on the way between the tent of meeting and the rock, their own feelings about the situation and the community start having a bearing on what's going to happen next. When they reach the rock, which is going to become the source of the water supply, Moses calls the community a band of rebels. It was 38 years of frustration that had finally come to a head, hearing the community complain time and time again when they felt that Yahweh and his earthly servant Moses were not meeting their needs. And now, in a fit of anger, Moses calls them rebels. And instead of speaking to the rock, as Yahweh had commanded him to do, instead he takes his staff and strikes the rock twice. The rock does provide the source of water they need for the community and the livestock. But now Moses has to face the music with his brother Aaron for his actions. Yahweh tells Moses and Aaron that they did not represent him correctly. In other words, Yahweh was not represented perfectly to the people by Moses and Aaron. And because of this action, it is now Yahweh's decision that leadership must be replaced. It'll turn out that Joshua will end up replacing Moses as the leader, and Eleazar will end up replacing his father Aaron as the priest. What happened to Moses and Aaron is an easy trap to fall into, and we can all be guilty of it. It's one thing to hear the word of the Lord and to correctly transmit it on to whoever you're speaking to. It's another thing when the word of the Lord is accompanied by our own feelings and opinions. In other words, it's Christ plus you with the message. The problem is we're not called to present our own feelings or our own opinions unless we've stated such. When representing Yahweh, whether you're a minister, a parishioner, is the same deal. We are to represent His word and His word only, unless we distinguish it by letting people know that whatever we're going to offer after that is simply our own opinions. Moses and Aaron presented their own opinions as if it was God's opinion. And in that case, at Kadesh, it was not God's opinion. And because of that, Moses and Aaron were not able to cross the finish line in their lives. For Moses, it had to be a tragedy, knowing the last 40 years with one goal in mind, to get the Israelites from Egypt to Palestine, and yet he was not able to do it. The same things can befall us. In fact, I wonder if that's what we're going through in these last 5 years. We've seen a lot of ministries crash and burn, some even this year in 2024. And my question is it because that Yahweh was not being correctly represented, or in this case, Christ? Is it that his ministers are not only giving the word of God, but adding their own take, their own feelings, and their own opinions to that word? If that's the case, then we're not really usable servants of God. And in many cases, these ministries have gone by the wayside. This is something we need to address all the time in our lives. When God does speak to us and we share that word, we want to make sure that we share exactly what God has said, what Christ has said. There needs to be no adding of our feelings or opinions to it. When representing God, that's exactly what we're doing. We're representing God. In the letter of Corinthians, Paul makes it a point in chapter 7 to distinguish his opinions about marriage from opinions that he received from Christ. And Paul makes it very clear to distinguish his views from the views of Christ. And it's important that we also, as believers, make that distinguishing remark. This is what I believe God has told me, and I will distinguish that from my own opinions, thoughts, or feelings. Today, we see a rash of this going on, especially the mixing of religion and politics. And we've got to be very, very careful how we transmit the gospel. Al and I have made it very clear that we want to distinguish between the message of Christ and the earthly realm of the political realm. We're not interested in talking politics. We're simply interested in conveying to you the word of the Lord as we receive it. We all want to cross the finish line in our walk with Christ. And a sure way to do it is to represent him correctly in all of our speaking and transmitting of ideas to those around us. We want to represent the Master that we serve and be good ambassadors for Christ. That's my thought for today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you again next week.